What is going on, guys? The ESPN NFL Playoff Predictor is back for 2018, and I felt like I should make a video to see if you guys like this. Some of you guys might be familiar with this tool, and you may have also wasted countless hours playing around with different scenarios, trying to see how your favorite team gets into the playoffs, or where they might be seeded in the playoffs and their potential matchups. I went ahead and plugged in my Week 14 predictions from my Pick'em video, and made some early predictions for the last few weeks of the season to see what the playoff landscape might actually look like. Now, I'm not going to spoil the last few regular season Pick'em videos and show you exactly who I picked for each game over the course of the last 3 weeks of the season, but you can kind of guess how I see the rest of the year playing out based on the final records. This video is just going to be a general overview of the playoffs, but I was thinking over the next couple weeks I could run scenarios for certain teams if that was something you guys might be interested in. I was also thinking about doing a live stream where I load up and we look at some of these crazy scenarios, like how to get the Browns the #1 seed in the AFC or something like that. If you guys want me to do a live stream, go ahead and type live stream in the comments and I'll schedule something for next week if enough people are interested. If you like the idea of seeing more playoff scenario videos, please hit that like button. If 200 people like this video, I'll do another one of these. At the end of the video, I'm going to give you 3 different Super Bowl predictions. The first one will be who I predict based on the way that my game-by-game simulation went and the matchups in the playoffs. The second one will be who I think that the best teams are from each conference. And the third one will be my NFL conspiracy theory version. This one will be based on who I think the NFL will kind of assist on reaching the Super Bowl to squeeze out the best ratings for the game. And actually, this prediction is based on how I think that the teams in this game could impact ratings down the road also. I know a lot of people don't like the conspiracy theories because it makes them feel like the NFL is no better than the WWE, but
they're probably watching us right now.
In my opinion, it's only a behind the scenes factor that doesn't always work out because there's still 22 men on the field trying to beat the guy across from them on every single play. So it's not exactly fixed, but more of a combination of the top teams versus the most appealing teams that make it to the Super Bowl. I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the way the rest of the 2018 season will play out, and then tell me your playoff predictions and who you think is going to win the Super Bowl in the comments below. Alright, here we go. No surprises in the AFC East. I've got the Patriots winning the division, but missing out on that bye week for the first time since 2009. So I think we're going to see Tom Brady on Wildcard weekend, and he probably won't be happy about it. It doesn't really seem to be a realistic way for the Patriots to avoid making the wildcard without some help from the teams playing the Chiefs, Chargers, and Texans. They do own the tiebreaker against the Chiefs, so they have to be rooting against the Chargers in their Thursday Night Football matchup next week. As for the draft order goes here, the Jets turned on tank mode and went winless for the remainder of the season, landing a top 3 pick in the 2019 NFL Draft. In the AFC North, I have the Steelers maintaining their current half-game lead over the Ravens to secure the division. The Ravens still managed to sneak in as the 6th seed, and they have the pleasure of heading to Foxborough to face a Patriots team that's going to be motivated by this shameful wildcard experience for the first time in a decade, so good luck with that. Actually, wouldn't it be cool if we saw Lamar Jackson have a Mike Vick and Lambeau performance and see him pull off the upset? Problem is, I just don't see Belichick and Brady going out like that, but it would be fun to see, and it's not a playoff berth, but the Browns didn't finish last in the AFC North, so that's pretty exciting for them. In the AFC West, I've got the Chargers running the table and stealing the division from the Chiefs and the 2nd seed overall. This division really comes down to the Thursday Night Football game in Arrowhead next week. Both teams have relatively easy schedules to finish out the season, so this head-to-head matchup is going to be crucial. The Chiefs currently own the tiebreaker from their matchup earlier in the season, but a lot has changed since then for both teams, and this will be a very important one. The Broncos probably have the easiest remaining schedule in the league, but they're going to have to beat the Chargers in Week 17, who might have a bye week on the line, and then they might have to hope for the Ravens to lose more than one also. So Broncos fans, you're going to need to root for the Chiefs over the Ravens this week and the Chargers next week to make that Week 17 game a little less important for them. But before that, root for the Chargers to beat the Ravens in Week 16. I think Oakland manages to land a win in Week 15 against the Bengals, and I'm not positive how the tiebreakers work, but they might actually fall behind in the Jets due to the draft tiebreaker being based on strength of schedule, and since they're in the AFC West, which is one of the toughest divisions in the league from the other teams and having such good records, they could end up with the 3rd pick. In the AFC South, after starting 0-3, I've got the Texans making a historic run of 13 straight games to close out the season. Even though the Saints did it last year, 0-2 is supposed to be the first indicator that your team's probably not making the playoffs, but 0-3 is supposed to be a death sentence. So this is a pretty amazing feat. I think that the slow start was due to the defense not quite playing like they are now, and Deshaun Watson not being 100% after tearing his ACL last year. It took a few games for him to shake the rust and trust that knee again, but now he's back to being one of the hardest players in the league to game plan for. The Colts and Titans are going to be in a similar boat as the Broncos, but with a much harder schedule. The Titans have actually beat some of the pretty good teams on their schedule, but then they lose to some of the shitty teams, whereas the Colts, on the other hand, other than last week against the Jaguars, have taken care of most of the bad teams on their schedule, but haven't really beat any of the great teams. These two teams play in Week 17, so I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up as a play-in game where the winner gets the last wildcard spot. Switching over to the NFC, in the NFC East, I've got the Cowboys losing one more game this season and then winning the division. The Eagles have a brutal schedule ahead of them, and I was probably tough on them and only gave them one more win, but even at 8-8, they're not making the playoffs. The Redskins will probably lose out with Mark Sanchez at quarterback, and the Giants have an easy game against the Redskins this week, but will probably finish with 3 playoff-hungry teams and take losses in all of those games. Moving on to the NFC North, I've got the Bears winning 3 of the next 4, which feels a little generous given their schedule, but entirely possible. And then they win the NFC North for the first time since 2010. That was the year that the Bears hosted the NFC Championship game against the Packers, and Jay Cutler showed us who he really was when he quit on his team with a knee injury after playing like shit for a whole half, and then the Packers went on to win the Super Bowl that year. Then I have the Vikings also finishing with 3 out of 4 possible wins, and it might come down to that Week 17 matchup with the Bears. If the Bears have already locked up the 3rd seed, do they want to try and knock the Vikings out of the playoffs with another loss, or do they like their chances and want to rest some of their starters and give the Vikings a chance at getting into the playoffs and then possibly have to host them in the wild card? A lot of different scenarios that could play out here. I actually could see the Packers going on a little run here after firing Mike McCarthy, and even with the Cardinals and Bills up next, I couldn't find any more wins for the Lions as they gear up for a top 10 draft pick. In the NFC West, the Rams continue to dominate on their way to the number 1 seed and a 15-1 record, and the Seahawks, going 2-2 down the stretch, sneak in as the 6th seed. But if they steal a 3rd game in there, they would make it in as the 5th instead. I think Arizona manages to show more signs of life in the last month of the season, while the 49ers continue to strive for that number 1 overall pick. Although, check this out, if the number 1 seed is not in jeopardy in Week 17, the Rams could rest players and basically give the 49ers the game and potentially cost them the number 1 overall pick with their 3rd win on the season. I know it seems petty, but think how much draft capital they would lose, and it would keep Nick Bosa out of your division, so it might be worth it. The NFC South is pretty much set already, but the Saints' schedule could feature another loss, if not 2. Playing a team that has nothing to play for twice in 3 weeks might not sound that hard, but these games are against a division rival Panthers team that was among the NFC's best in the first half of the season. And then sandwich the Steelers in between those 2 games, who, mind you, are going to be desperate for wins at that point in the season. You've got a tough finish to the season here for the Saints. Hopefully for their sake, they haven't already looked past the Bucs at the schedule, and they take care of business down in Tampa this week. The Bucs should lose out and finish with a top 10 draft pick in the 2019 NFL Draft. Phew. Alright, let's get on to the actual playoffs now. I told you I'd give you 3 Super Bowl scenarios, and the first one is going to be based on the simulation that you've been looking at this whole time, starting in the Wildcard Round. With Ravens at Patriots, I already went over this a little bit. I would love to see Lamar Jackson cause problems for that Patriots defense, but Belichick doesn't lose to rookie quarterbacks in the playoffs, so the Patriots would be headed to LA to play the Chargers in the Divisional Round. In the rematch of Chiefs at Steelers, I could see this game being played similarly to the way the first one started this year, minus the Steelers spotting the Chiefs 21 points in the first quarter, and the Steelers get redemption and move on to play the Texans. Seahawks at Bears. Here we've got a veteran quarterback in Russell Wilson who is playing at a very high level against a young quarterback in the playoffs for the very first time. If Mitch Trubisky was the engine driving this Bears team, I might be worried for him, but Soldier Field in the playoffs is a tough place to play, and I don't think that the Seahawks will be able to block Khalil Mack. I think the Bears win and move on to New Orleans to play the Saints. Vikings at Cowboys. The Vikings barely squeaked in the playoffs by beating up on all the lesser opponents on their schedule, and the Cowboys are all too familiar with making Kirk Cousins uncomfortable from his time with the Redskins. Cowboys win and head to LA to take on the Rams. In the divisional round, we have Patriots at Chargers, Steelers at Texans, Bears at Saints, and Cowboys at Rams. Let's run through these real quick. In Patriots at Chargers, I think we see the difference in Foxborough Brady versus visitor Brady, even though the stands might be filled with mostly Patriots fans. The Chargers pass rush is going to make Brady uncomfortable all day, and that's traditionally been the way to knock the Patriots out of the playoffs. The Chargers then wait to see if the Steelers can knock off the Texans, so they'd be able to host another playoff game. In Steelers and Texans, every year it seems like there's a number 1 or 2 seed that gets knocked off a lot sooner than expected, and this would be the matchup where I think it would make a lot of sense. I think that off week can really hurt teams that are poorly coached, and they come out and they get off to a slow start and they can't recover once they get their feet underneath them. But Bill O'Brien gets a bad rap, and I think that this Texans team is actually a pretty veteran-laden squad other than the quarterback, and the quarterback is a big game kind of guy anyways. I used to say that Big Ben in his prime was one of the best big game quarterbacks I had ever seen because he was such a big, tough SOB and seemed to come through in the clutch over and over. But Ben's time is coming to a close, and I think it's Deshaun Watson's time now. Texans win, and the AFC Championship game will be Chargers at Texans. Shifting over to the divisional round in the NFC, we've got Bears at Saints. The Bears defense is the type of matchup nightmare for the Saints in the playoffs. This matchup is all too familiar and similar to the Cowboys and Saints one that just took place last week. I actually think that the Bears could come in and shock the world in the playoffs, but Drew Brees in New Orleans is something special, guys, and I think he does something special in this game for potentially what could be his last playoff game in the Superdome. Saints win. Cowboys at Rams. The Cowboys finally win a playoff game, and Jerry Jones will be sitting in his luxury box saying, see, I told you that we could be as good as the Rams. And this would actually be an exciting matchup because the Rams offense and the Cowboys defense would be a pretty even fight. But Aaron Donald, man, this dude has been unblockable this year, and the interior of the offensive line for the Cowboys has some question marks. If Travis Frederick was healthy and playing, I could toy with the idea of picking the Cowboys here in the upset, but I don't think that Joe Looney and Xavier Su'a-Fila or Connor Williams or whoever is at left guard will be able to contain Donald. Zach Martin will be able to hold his own, but I don't think that they're going to allow him to have that matchup. Rams win, and the NFC Championship is Saints at Rams. I know you're probably annoyed that only the 1 and 2 seeds made it to the championship games because those are boring picks, but look, I'm trying to be right. And if you look at the last decade or so, the top 3 seeds are typically the ones that make it to the championship rounds, with a few outliers, Cinderella stories sprinkled in here or there. In the NFC Championship game, I have the Rams outscoring the Saints 74-75. Totally kidding, but it's going to be a high scoring game if that's the game that we get. And in the AFC Championship game, I have the Chargers beating the Texans to make the first ever Los Angeles Super Bowl. For the second Super Bowl scenario, my personal opinion, I would pick the Rams and Texans right now in the Super Bowl. The Rams are the best team overall in my eyes, with the Saints a very close second. Aaron Donald is honestly the best player on either team, and the fact that he can single-handedly shut down an opposing offense is the difference in the two for me. The Texans, they've got my favorite quarterback in the league right now, and I can't pick against him because he's just got that X factor. I think that the Rams should win the Super Bowl this year, but here now I'll give you my third conspiracy theory side for why I think that they won't. The NFL has handled bringing teams back to LA with kid gloves because they know how sensitive the people of LA are. No offense to you guys, but they know that going to football games is not the only thing that you can do in LA, so they have to make you guys into fans. They failed with the Chargers so far, but the Rams already had a fan base in LA. They just had to wake them up a little bit. It was just a fortunate circumstance that both LA teams happened to be good immediately after moving there. But think about what would happen to the fans in LA, the Rams fans mostly, if they got a Super Bowl so soon. It would become just another fad that burns out slowly over the next few years. People would lose interest. You give them a taste of that playoff atmosphere, and they lose a close, epic battle to a legend like Drew Brees, though, and you're desperate for more the next season, thinking, all right, this is really going to be our year. So the Saints making it to the Super Bowl is one half of my conspiracy theory Super Bowl prediction, because you could see in the Saints game against the Redskins earlier this year how much the NFL wanted Drew Brees to break those records in prime time, and he's finally going to get his MVP trophy this year, and then he's going to head off into the sunset with his second Super Bowl victory. But who does the NFL want the loser to be to Brees and the Saints in the Super Bowl? I thought about the Steelers because the fan base is probably the second or third largest in the league, and then making it there without Le'Veon Bell would be just a big middle finger to any of the other players that try to hold an NFL team hostage in the future like this, but I don't think that they're just quite good enough to get there. Texans, they've got a bright future, so they probably have a few more chances the next few seasons, so scratch that. The Chiefs aren't going because they don't want to have to cover this Kareem Hunt thing for 2 weeks leading up to the game. I'm sure there'd be even more stories and horror stories that came out about him. So I think that it's got to be the Chargers. Think about it. Brees gets to beat the team that moved on from him and drafted Phillip Rivers to replace him, and they get a chance to get some actual fans for the Chargers in the process to potentially show up next year in a similar scenario with the Rams. Fandom's like a drug. Once you get that first rush, you come back for more, trying to chase that feeling. Alright, hopefully you guys don't think I'm crazy for giving this conspiracy theory prediction like that, but I've never made that side of my sports brain public, so it'll be fun to see how everything goes down. That's going to do it for me though. I hope you guys like this. Once again, I appreciate you guys watching, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff. Please hit that like button so we can hit our goal of 200 likes, and I will see you all in the next video.